You are listening to another Third Coast Nerds podcast. Keep your damn hands off my internet, you greedy motherfucker.
Welcome to the show. I really wanted this intro to be because it's a very special number, and I've waited 2 years to arrive at this number. And I really wanted the intro to be tonight we're going to party like it's episode 99. Mm-hmm. And sadly, it can't happen.
I'm sorry this ruined it.
It's okay. It was bound to happen. The entire purpose for this episode is to talk about net neutrality. It's possible that this could get political. It's going to stay as balanced as possible. Got a lot of great feedback on our Trumpcast episodes, specifically for them being very well balanced and discussing both sides of the issue quite well. So I'm joined by Chris, who's making his first appearance on the Third Coast Nerds podcast. We've done one other podcast together that has never seen the light of day.
Nor will it ever, I'm almost positive.
Probably won't, and it sucks because it was a great discussion. And Trevor, Magical Trevor, has joined us for another episode. So I hate to put you on the spot, but I've already informed you that I'm going to do that a lot because you are a master at explaining issues quite eloquently. So I would like to throw to you to explain what is the current situation with net neutrality and where the arguments stand.
Okay. So about 2 years ago, April 26th, 2015, the FCC finally finished their request for comments, their notice of new rulemaking. That basically says, okay, we are going to take this issue on of handling the open internet. We're going to take issue with the concept of paid prioritization, so the whole Netflix issue with Comcast and them having to do a peering agreement in order to actually get decent speed to their customers. And a few other practices that they basically thought were anti-competitive or just not a great way to handle the internet. The whole idea behind the Open Internet Act back in 2014, ending in 2015, and as it is now up until they finish this vote, was that there needs to be some way to control the people who own the infrastructure for the internet. So you have your level 3s, the UNETs, the Comcast, the AT&T, Verizon, so on and so on. And basically these companies have made huge investments in the infrastructure in the United States and around the world, actually. And it's in their best interest to protect that investment. Yeah. So, I mean, you saw that sort of thing with how Comcast said, look, Netflix, when people use your service, they just kick the shit out of our network.
Yeah,
they do. I mean, and I mean, to be fair, that's kind of how it works. But there was never a reason for this to be an issue in the past. So I mean, the internet has been a place for downloading text files or images or videos, small videos, and then you get these streaming services out there, Hulu, Netflix. And even Pandora or a number of the music streaming or downloading or the peer-to-peer networking and stuff that originally caused this sort of issue back in the day in 2010. Back in the day, fucking 7 years, Jesus Christ. But so I mean, this was brought to task in 2010 when the whole peer-to-peer issue really came to a head, and lo and behold, Comcast was at the center of that one too. They were saying, look, the people using your peer-to-peer networking applications, you're chewing up our bandwidth, and we don't like it. So we're going to progressively step down your service until it becomes unusable for you. And the FCC stepped in at that point and said, hey, no, that's not okay. I mean, it's any legal use of the internet shouldn't be, messed with. You don't need to step in the way of that. And they put the kibosh on that, and then Comcast had to update their terms, and that's when the whole concept of bandwidth caps came in.
Yeah.
So you have this unlimited internet connection, but you use 50 gigs this month. It's more than most people use.
Yeah.
We're gonna cut that down.
We're gonna throttle you.
Yeah, we're gonna throttle that, and that was one of the things that was taken to task in 2014. Look, we see this concept of throttling users because you don't like the type of traffic that's going across your network. That's not okay. You don't like the fact that this business produces a lot of traffic on your network, and you're actively putting in blocks on that. That's not okay. So what the FCC did back then was step in the way and said, these things are not okay. The internet is free and open. And as long as people are using it for legal means, you have no reason to limit that.
Yeah. You should have no recourse for it.
Yeah. So, outside of technical issues, if you're seeing congestion or whatever, and you feel the need to, partition the traffic, throttle it, whatever, then, that's the nature of the beast, and we'll understand that. But if there's, a rule in your system that says that this application's traffic is of lower quality than any other, that's not okay. So what we're at right now is the vote on the floor is to basically nullify that resolution. And what that brings us back to is when the FCC wasn't in control of this. And you can argue back and forth whether they actually are in control or not, because the wording is pretty lenient. They call out the specific practices, of course, but I mean, ISPs got around that by changing their terms and conditions for using their service. The bandwidth caps, them being upfront and saying, look, if you do certain activities, we're going to throttle them. And then you've got the whole concepts like where T-Mobile says they're binge on or things like that. Like those are the polar opposite of these sorts of things, but not exactly. They still do throttling, but it on quality for those specific things. But they don't. It doesn't apply to your limit of your bandwidth. So
Okay.
they say, look, we'll guarantee you that you can stream your Netflix at 480p, which we all know Netflix can stream up to 4K.
Yeah.
But they'll say, well, at 480p, that's reasonable for any phone screen, and I think any reasonable person would agree with that.
Not Kenneth.
Not Kenneth.
Yeah.
I'm speaking as T-Mobile here. I too would like 4K on my phone, even my phone doesn't have a 4K screen. But the idea there is like, this is our terms. We're up front with them. The FCC can't do anything about that. So
because the customer has at that point agreed to streaming it in that low of a quality,
right?
Regardless, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, if when you sign up for service, you can agree to them bending you over every month and raping you up the ass. I mean, they can't do anything about that.
Yeah.
You agreed to that.
Yeah.
Or 50 gig limit or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
When you pass it, they'll charge you per gig or per
point.
Or Kenneth's terms of service, where at any point he can ask you for a cheeseburger, and you have to supply the cheeseburger.
Right, exactly. So I mean,
which was the terms for Monkey Server. Yeah. It was an email server he ran.
Yeah, I remember you guys telling me about that. He could read whatever email he wanted.
Yeah.
So I mean. And then they throw in things in there, of course, like, there are exceptions for national security or technical reservations for, keeping your networks running and things like that. So I mean, it's not like it was some heavy-handed rule that put Comcast and AT&T and whatever in their place. It's what we're fighting over is, some milquetoast, toothless resolution. I mean, it's like It's like fighting a UN resolution. I mean, seriously, it has no teeth.
Yeah.
So, I mean, people are up in arms about this, but it's truly because of the words that are used.
Right.
And I'm going to go to the clear correct thing here, and we're going to talk about definitions. No, but I mean, that's truly all it is. They're saying net neutrality, and that was such a buzzword that people used, a few years ago, that and they got so up in arms about, and they're counting on that. So the person that's the chairman of the FCC now, Chairman Pie. Let's call him Chairman Pie because it sounds like something about Iron Chef.
Ajit Pai.
Ajit Pai.
You had the middle name before the show, and
I was gonna take that out. It's fine. So
because it's syllables, and it's like M. Night Shyamalan, something like that. Yeah, exactly. No, sounds like a nursery rhyme a little bit.
So his original opinion on this was a dissenting opinion, and he said, look, the FCC isn't the organization to handle this. We're not a governing body. We're a regulatory body. We make sure that the things that are transmitted are done so within certain parameters. We make sure that the technology necessary to make all this stuff function is accessible. They're in charge of all of the wireless spectrum. They're in charge of how cable TV works on the cable TV lines. They're in charge of making sure that all of the telecommunication providers play nice to each other. So, I have an AT&T long distance plan, and you've got a Verizon long distance plan that if I pick up the phone and call you, it's going to go through. I mean, that's their responsibility, and even that last part is what got him into this situation in the first place. So they have this concept of Title II under the Communication Act, and that is under their purview, and that regulates communication as a utility, voice communication as a utility, and even including ISDN lines and eventually DSL, because they were all over the same common carrier lines.
Yeah.
So they said, well, we have this authority. We can ask that Congress says, hey, okay, you can handle this. FCC, you can handle this. You can be in charge of what's right or what's wrong or what's good or what's bad about the internet and how people use it and keeping it open and all that sort of stuff. And we started this conversation before the show by me saying, I don't think anybody on either side of the aisle thinks that net neutrality as a concept is a bad thing. See, what people disagree on is how we keep the internet open and free.
Well, it's we can go back to the series of tubes incident, to kind of get a little bit of a broad view of folks on the Hill and their understanding of the technology and how all this actually functions. Yeah. Which that was a pretty bad look.
No, definitely
back then. That was the first thing that made my wall of stupid.
Mm-hmm.
But it's getting wrapped up in the lingo between lawmakers and the FCC, when the FCC is there to sort of not so much make law, but when they issue statements or when they speak about something like net neutrality in public, they use rhetoric as if they are lawmakers.
Right.
And that kind of clouds the issue to me.
No, I agree. And I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes from. A lot of it where they say repeal net neutrality. And my immediate response to that when I read it was fuck off. Like, it's not a law.
Yeah.
Right.
And to the point where I actually kind of doubted myself and had to double check it.
Yeah.
I was like, no, it's definitely not a law. So, and no federal regulations, nothing in 47 CFR, none of them were changed whatsoever because of this. What it was an approved interpretation of their powers. And what they're doing now is saying, maybe we don't really approve of your interpretation of those powers under Title II or Section 706 or whatever. We think that this isn't the route to go, and since Republicans are in charge of it, of the repeal, they're painted as
they're against net neutrality.
They're against net neutrality, or their pockets are lined by the ISPs, by the telecommunication companies, which very well could be true. I mean, the internet service providers have a vested interest in having some sort of way to protect their infrastructure, and the one way that they have of that is financial. I mean, they could very well say, okay, you subscribe to Netflix. Okay, you pay Netflix $8 a month. Netflix pays some internet company, for their OC 1000 line or whatever, in their billion data centers, for their access. Well, I want a cut of that. So anybody who subscribes to Netflix, I will now put a $2 surcharge on their bill. And that covers my cost of having to deal with the bandwidth generated by Netflix. And had they have taken that route, I think we'd all be in a different, we'd all be saying a different story right now. It'd just be another fee that Comcast added to your bill, and that'd been the end of the story. And I think people might have raised a stink about it, but and maybe if enough uproar came up, they would take it off the bill or something. But the route they took was to say, look, Netflix, you don't pay Comcast directly for the bandwidth that you use. You're a big company. You make lots of money off of these people, off of my subscribers. I want a cut of that. I want you to set up a direct connection to our backbone network at some cost. And then, we'll go ahead and let your traffic go through. We won't worry about it after that. But if you don't, then we'll just prioritize your traffic lower than other things. So people on our network who use your service will get a poor experience.
Yeah, and they won't want your service.
Subscribers.
Yeah, which this actually just happened between Netflix and Comcast.
Yeah, this is what prompted
the catalyst for a lot of it.
Yeah, so and because they took this route and Netflix didn't just roll over and take it, and they brought it to the public, then this whole concept of net neutrality really came back to the forefront, because again, like it was a big deal in 2010 because of the peer-to-peer sharing. And
Napster, and many
Napster,
other things,
Kazaa, LimeWire, all those. I mean, it was a big story then, but it didn't get a lot of attention.
Well, we've come a long way in terms of social media.
Well, and that's the thing.
And it's been in the forefront. A lot of these issues with specifically internet-based communications have been a repeating ordeal. SOPA, PIPA, all these different attempts to further regulate internet and specifically commerce over the internet. So it's something that feels like it's a continuing threat.
No, definitely, and I think the biggest threat, honestly, to the internet is ignorance. Yeah. I mean, so of the people in charge, and apathy of the people who know better. So you have these lifelong politicians who have made a career out of just being an elected official, and don't get me started on that. It's a horrible one, but we'll stick to this. Who really don't have a vested interest or need to understand what the internet is and what it does. I mean, to them, it's just a magic, mystical force series of tubes, that
they get clogged up every once in a while.
They get clogged up every once in a while.
And he doesn't get his emails for a week.
Right, exactly, and somebody's got to break out
specifically an internet.
An internet, yeah.
Or maybe the email goes poof.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
God.
poof.
Oh no. Poof. Yes. The inside jokes and the esoteric responses. So,
There can be only one.
yeah.
It's rare. As an aside, it's rare that we're all in the same room together, and it's so comforting
been a very
to
long
hear
time.
those old jokes again. But
No,
I'm sorry, carry on.
No, it is. So to them, you break out the internet plunger. Like seriously, how big of a deal is this? But I mean, when you truly understand how all this works, I mean, it's about as far from magic as it gets. But you have these massive investments in
Trillions of dollars.
Oh yeah,
that they built in infrastructure.
Oh yeah, and I mean dating back to 1800s. I mean, in some of this infrastructure is extremely old, and to have done that back in the day was hugely expensive, but extremely important.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't. I mean, you can, but you have to have a little bit of a heart for the corporations. You got to say, look, we get it. You spent a lot of money making all this stuff happen, and we just use this. Like I plug in my cable modem into the wall, and I hook up my Wi-Fi, and I've got a connection to the wealth of the world's knowledge, and it costs me $60 a month. And it's difficult to try to make the case either way. I mean, the internet needs to be free and open. I mean, and I don't think anybody disagrees with that, and nobody in this room for sure.
Right.
I mean, and least of all me. I mean, I've got a vested interest in making sure the internet stays open and free too, but people got to get paid, and there are still portions of the United States without decent broadband.
Yeah.
And that requires an infrastructure
to be built.
Yeah, investment. That last mile has to get built in some way, shape, or form. So either they drag their feet until the cellular industry, kicks off 5G, and then finishes blanketing the rest of the country. So if you are out of service of anybody else, you get WiMAX or whatever. But or they put some money in, they dig some holes, and they lay some pipe. So you have to understand how a legislation, a rule of some kind that makes it so they can't capitalize on that, whether appropriate or not, it's going to make them drag their feet.
Oh yeah, it's a thorn in the side.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's saying, look, you want me to meet this, magical mandate of everybody in the United States has to have 20 megabit per second internet by 2020, and then help me out here.
Yeah.
So when I was discussing this with Josephine the other day, and I said, it might not be a bad idea. It might not be a bad idea if they did, want to really do something about this. They could say, okay, internet is a utility, along the lines of electricity, along the lines of gas, along the lines of water. So your houses are guaranteed to have it, and state governments have utility commissions to control this sort of stuff. In Texas, electric utilities and other utilities are deregulated. Mm-hmm. So you have the provider that owns the infrastructure, like around here in Houston, it's CenterPoint.
Yeah.
So CenterPoint owns all the lines, but you can buy your electricity from anybody. So I mean that at that point, what that does is it says, okay, whoever has the most infrastructure in a particular metro area becomes the infrastructure provider. So if AT&T has most of the fiber, most of the copper, whatever here in Houston, then they become the center point for internet. But that also means that end users, people at houses, businesses, whatever, they can't get their internet from AT&T.
Yep.
They have to get it through some sort of a retail internet provider. You know, so you can't get electricity from CenterPoint directly.
Nope.
You have to get it through a rep. You know,
well, that creates an interesting side discussion, though. The majority of what I see Chairman Pye saying about this is that these rules are halting progress, and they're hurting. They're going to hurt investment in small businesses, specifically people that want to become a service provider.
Yeah.
Would that situation not breed a race to not only be the first one with the most investment into a market, and then you'd also have all these people coming up as retailers for broadband?
Yeah, and honestly, what would probably happen is you'd get things like Cricket. You know, so like
That's
Cricket,
exactly what happened with the cell phone market.
like Cricket's an MVNO. You know, so that they resell AT&T's services. So they use AT&T's infrastructure, but they have their own subscribers. And what they basically do is they buy a giant block of bandwidth or of data from AT&T on a frequent basis, and then they delineate that out to their customers, and so they buy it in bulk so they can sell it at a lower price than AT&T does. But I mean, who owns Cricket?
Yeah.
AT&T.
Yeah.
So
and
what?
Boost is Sprint, and there's,
yeah,
I mean, there's
exactly.
all.
Yeah, it's all of there's a bunch of these MVNOs that exist, and they're generally owned by a larger infrastructure provider. So a lot of these people a lot of these companies would likely do something along those lines. They would create a separate corporation that would do exactly that. They'd resell their own services, but what this also does is it sets them up to be compensated or granted certain funds from the government, from the state government, from the federal government, whatever, to meet some of these requirements that the government puts out. So they say, look, okay, everybody in the United States needs to have access to 20 megabit per second broadband internet. So if they were to take it upon themselves to say, hey, okay, internet's a utility, we'll just call it that and be done. So we're going to legislate it. We're going to treat it like a utility. We're going to set up we're going to alter the public utility groups in each one of the states to accept this sort of responsibility, and set up a concept of a retail internet provider. And then all these retail internet providers would pop up. So I mean, we have 1,000 of them here in Texas. I mean, every day I hear a new ad for another electric company.
Yeah.
So I mean, the concept has a precedent. It could work, I think. So I mean, what the FCC wants is suggestions. They want to know how they're supposed to do this.
Right.
I mean, what they're getting right now is don't take away my net neutrality. I need my internet to be free and open.
But that's the misconception: is people think that net neutrality says they think it's a law, and they think, oh, it's the government mandating that I get free internet and that they don't track where I go and that they're not able to watch what I do. And they think it's
the honest read.
The
honest read on the term of net neutrality from the people that half and half, roughly. Half the people I interact with just hear this term, and it seems like the reaction is, sounds like communism, bad.
Yeah.
yeah, I got you.
I think really it's more about them deciding how to govern it and what should be governed and how it should be controlled before they actually make laws, regulations, or give it to a governing body such as a utility commission.
Right, and so what they need to figure out is what's okay and what's not okay, and the big thing is they need to know what's possible.
Yeah, well, it's difficult to open up that dialogue because you had half and half. So there was a call to make comments on what the FCC should do. Their comments page crashed.
Yep.
Because it seemed like it was half and half. Of course, you had a flood of people who were actually running to it. A lot of people saying, don't destroy net neutrality, don't destroy this concept. The other half were anti-Obama protesters that were just spamming the page. Yeah. And apparently the page went down due to a denial of service attack. So we didn't really get a decent amount of feedback on this on their comments page. But the internet as a whole, there's more than enough places to comment. And I've read a lot of message boards that seem to be lost in the cry of don't take this away, this is all bad, what's going on, boo Trump.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The guy gets a lot of undue credit.
yeah. But so we get lost down this rabbit hole of they're taking away our internets. What I don't know how you have a reasonable discussion about something like this on a broad scale.
Yeah, and that's
because you do have a history. You have AOL that wanted to set up their walled garden of internet. Right. You've had multiple instances where internet service providers have dialed down access to something or out and out blocked it until the FCC came along and said, no, you can't do that, or the Federal Trade Commission had to step in and say, don't do that. Mm-hmm. So we're kind of half and half with the idea that regulation and government rulings are bad when they've actually had to step in and make a call for the greater good of the consumers, because they're not going to listen to their consumers when they say we don't want this. It's like, well, tough. This is their business model. This is what it's going to be.
Right.
So it's a 50-50 wager on how any of this is going to go. And so I think a lot of people see that and they're scared that we may not have, if they let this slip, then we may not have a recourse to be able to draw it back.
I mean, there is that's a concern. The biggest tool that anybody has in a discussion is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Mm-hmm. And it's extremely useful, but it's horribly detrimental to the process. So, I mean, and that's what we have right now. There's a lot of people running around screaming, like, oh my God, they're going to take away the internet. Oh my God, they're going to block everything. Or, oh my God, if we do this, it's just like communism. And none of that is true. No internet provider is going to take away the internet.
That's how they make money.
Right. And because we live in a capitalist society, there will always be at least one internet provider that's going to allow whatever you want.
But again, my experience with this, I mean, I've got a 14-year history of living in an area where there was only one provider.
Right.
Because we do have situations where homeowners associations will make a deal with a provider for the next 30 years.
Sure. And
they disallow competition in the area.
Right.
And the argument seems to be, well, Comcast is just 2 miles down the road, pick up stakes and move. Mm-hmm. And that's not always a possibility for a lot of people.
Well, yeah. And I mean, we have this conversation with lots of people for a number of topics. I mean, we talk about world hunger, and you're like, well, fuck, don't live in the desert. And
Sam Kinison.
Yeah. Go where the food is. I brought you a truck. No, so I mean, yeah, there's definitely a certain amount of that sentiment, especially among people who are the haves. Mm-hmm. And I say, well, I have because I'm here. You have not because you're there.
Yeah.
And I mean that's an easy position to take when you have, and it's an easy position to hate when you have not. So it's, and that's where we kind of get into this deadlock. And you go on Facebook, you go on Twitter, you go on whatever, and you bitch about it and you feel better. But no real change ever happens. So what needs to happen is there has to be some sort of way to come up with a solution to give to the government, or say, okay, government, get out of it. Just be done. We don't want your help. We don't need your help. We can figure this out on our own, because the government's not really all that great at getting stuff done. what they are good at is throwing money at things. So that's where my idea of, you know, treating internet as a utility kind of meets it in the middle ground, you know, where the government has a recourse and a responsibility to augment that investment, just like they do for electric power, just like they do for telecommunications at the low level. But
because we've had a little bit of both. I mean, we've had you can kind of see the there is companies want to maximize their profits. That is true. They would like to be they would like to have some sort of flash, some sort of reason for customers to come to them.
Right.
That is true. But we've also seen, you know, Ed Whitaker when he was over AT&T back in 2003 telling people that fiber was an unproven technology and that we shouldn't invest in it.
Right.
And taking
it's only been around for 35, 40 years.
Yeah, filing lawsuits against the city of Chicago when Chicago wanted to take it in their own hands and roll out their own fiber network.
Right.
And that was a giant battle between AT&T and Chicago over something. I don't know how much money AT&T had received from the government specifically to take on those projects, and they never happened. Rolling out broadband to rural areas, that never happened.
Right.
That money went somewhere, like you said. You know, the best thing government can do is throw money at something, and nothing ever came of it.
But what they're really, really bad at is oversight.
Yeah.
And it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
But I mean, and that's a good point. Now, but AT&T's reticence at that point most likely wasn't, you know, being a stick shaker. It was that they have so much infrastructure that to backhaul it to handle the all of the sudden floodgate that would be lighting up the entire city of Chicago with fiber.
And it's a
huge stress on their network.
It's an insanely difficult city to take on something like that.
Right.
Like you said, a lot of this infrastructure dates back to the 1800s. Chicago is one of the oldest cities there is. Their copper infrastructure is
in the United States.
Crazy old. Yes. It's an anecdote I like to bring up a lot. Is that Kenneth called me once. He was over in Europe, and he calls me and tells me, he's like, I'm sitting at a table in a pub on a street that's older than the country we live in.
Yeah.
He's like, this table's old as shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, we ain't that old, y'all. But we have this old infrastructure, and it's kind of telling that we do. What is our ranking in terms of broadband? Depending on, it's not high. I mean, depending on what you look at, it's anywhere from we're 17th in the world to 50th possibly.
Yeah.
But you have a lot of younger developing nations that have had a chance to get on board when broadband was on the come up. So you have fiber from the start.
Or, you know, they were, you know, fortunate enough to get bound by the United States.
Yeah, and our contractors, you know, got paid a lot of money to go do that.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is bomb Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, hell, you throw the Army Corps of Engineers in there. I mean,
if we happen to trick terrorists into attacking a city, if we just evacuated ahead of time.
No, don't say shit like that.
It's a terrible joke that I had. Is that if we can somehow dupe terrorists into doing our demolition projects for us, we don't have to pay anybody to do that.
Just evac ahead of time.
Just evac ahead of time. Set up stick figures like it's like I Am Legend.
Yeah.
A bunch of mannequins like I Am Legend.
Yep.
So yeah. God damn it! I want to list now.
I'm just saying, man.
Sometimes these jokes get you in trouble. So with these two things in mind, I mean, is regulating it or calling it a utility is the best? Because I mean, we have a lot of people. There's of two minds of the way the internet is. A lot of people see it as a toy, as a convenience,
right.
As a luxury. But how many places do you walk into to ask for a job and they turn you away and tell you to go sign up for it online? Go apply online.
Sure.
So it is a needed tool in a lot of ways for
I
life
think
these days.
You could call it a commodity at this point. It's not.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely to me has the importance of any other utility.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, it like in my life, and the vast majority of people that I know or have run into or walked by in near recent past, is to me and all those people, internet is as important as electricity.
Yeah.
And I mean, it might not feed me, but I mean, honestly, internet's how I make my money.
Yeah.
It's what I do.
Internet, to me, I mean, in my existence, it's not only a critical tool for my job, but it's also a critical tool to prevent fuckery in my life. Because how many times have I seen where something breaks on my vehicle or something happens around the house, and it's taking money out of someone else's pocket. It's going to overcharge me to come in and do the same thing that I just learned how to do from YouTube in a 3-minute video.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Well, the internet's importance to me, dating back since the day I moved out of my parents' house in, 2001. The first thing on my list at any apartment complex or house I was looking at was, who are the internet providers and what are the speeds available?
Right.
I have to know that before I'm even willing to look beyond that, because it is important to me, and not necessarily from an entertainment perspective, but like you said, job, livelihood, other things that factors
Porn,
into.
definitely porn.
Lots and lots.
Lots of porn.
Which is funny because, for better or for worse, the porn industry has really shaped the development of
It
technologies.
truly has. They decided the war between VHS and Betamax.
They decided DVD or
And
Blu-ray
Blu-ray
versus
HD DVD.
Yeah.
I thought Disney had a lot more to do with that.
I don't
A
think
lot
so.
of the major film developers had a lot to do with it.
The porn industry actually puts out far higher numbers.
Yeah, the volume there is much higher.
The volume is insane.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so they're the ones that have decided a lot of these technology battles, and not that I've gone hunting for it, but I'm surprised I haven't heard some sort of anecdote that says the porn industry sides with this for this reason.
Yeah, well, I don't know what's Pornhub think about this.
Yeah. Get Ja Rule on the phone, damn it. I want to know what Ja thinks.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess it's kind of telling that you can't really have much of a conversation about this sort of stuff without at least bringing it up.
Yeah.
But it's true. It's a driver. And
the internet's for porn and cats.
Exactly.
That's the saying.
Exactly. Yes.
Countless memes
Cat
will tell you
videos.
this.
Yes, and if there's enough of them, it's true. So.
Shout out to Garcia, Catman.
Yes.
Catman cometh. I know he's happy about cats all the time.
Every day.
So, with the players in this field, Google has weighed in. I mean, you always get, anytime that there's a regulation or some sort of law or some sort of ruling that comes down, you'll usually get the heavy hitters weighing in on it. I believe I read today there's talks of doing a slow down protest day, where various websites and providers are going to slow down their traffic. To them, they're going to give you some insight into what the potential after effects of retracting these rules are going to cause. We have lived without these. We lived without this ruling before.
Right.
What we do going forward once it's retracted, who knows?
Right.
But we've seen, like I mentioned before, we've seen a lot of issues where providers are chomping at the bit to either charge more money or potentially we've had a lot of talks about, or I've read a lot of talks about a tiered internet where you're going to pay more if you're a gamer, you're going to pay more if you want access to Netflix,
Right.
Yeah.
you're going to pay more for YouTube, you're going to pay, you're going to have to, if you want anything more than the basic internet package, you're going to have to pay more money for it.
Right.
Which
And-
there's already package breakdowns. I mean, if you look at any halfway intelligent person when it comes to technology, you can look at what you use. How many PCs do you run in your house simultaneously? What are you doing on them? YouTube.
It's not so much a concern about bandwidth overall. It's a concern that you may get into a situation where you choose, like you may browse to YouTube. You type in youtube.com and it says your tier does not allow for this website. Your plan does not allow access to this website.
Well, what I'm saying is they've already got tiered structure for bandwidth in there instead
For
of
sure.
for filtering and whitelisting, blacklisting certain sites.
Yeah.
And I can't see a situation where a consumer would be okay with that. I wouldn't be okay with that as a consumer.
Well,
Whereas if you, like he was saying, if you make it a commodity, you make it a utility, then you're going to open up the door for a lot of different providers, and there will be a competition.
which I think is a fantastic idea. But we do have a large share of the country that ain't in a city.
Right.
And
don't care about no internets.
They don't know about the internets. They got dial-up at best, or satellite, or
satellite. Yeah. So I mean, and there's the rub, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So I mean, where do you put the incentive? Where do you put the penalty?
Yeah.
So in my personal beliefs, I mean, I tend to believe the government does nothing well, and I don't think that the vast majority of it should exist at all. I mean, the whole concept of the IRS bothers me to no end. Like, you send me paperwork that says how much I owe you,
yeah,
and then I have to send you paper that says, sure,
or not so much.
Yeah, or you could just fucking take it from me and be done with it. I don't need to file my taxes every year. So I mean, that kind of stuff bothers the piss out of me, and so I don't believe the government does anything well, and I believe that they, especially in matters of commerce, that they keep their hands out. Mm-hmm. And they tend to make things more expensive and more difficult for people who want to provide services or even consume them in general. But the internet is a dangerous place. There's a lot of stuff out there that, be it malware, be it, illegal content, be it whatever. I mean, maybe some oversight is necessary. Whether it has to be the government that does it or not, I don't know. But they tend to be the only ones with the means to do so. So, you have to look
with spam and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it seems to be your only recourse is to report it to the FTC and hope for the best and hope that it gets taken down.
The government. Yeah. So I mean, you look at the problem. So I mean,
because I think the only other method is to somehow you would have like a whole group of contractors who are essentially broadband mercenaries that would just launch counter DDoS attacks.
Yeah. Yeah. Like a Blackwater of the internet.
Yeah.
I like that. Sounds nice, actually.
You would gladly join.
Yeah,
you would gladly join.
My personal internet army. No, available for hire. No, I mean...
thumbs down my video. Take them out.
Right. Yes.
Feelings hurt everywhere.
Right. But so you look at what are the problems? Okay, so we have aging infrastructure. We have the fact that it's extremely expensive to upgrade it or to augment it. So that's problem the first. And then, so to get it further than where it is now takes a lot of money. You have providers that exist currently that have subscribers, and they want to make money. And that's problem the second. You have content providers, YouTube, you have Netflix and stuff, and then you have what's coming next.
You have an emerging populace that doesn't have a job. That their career is generating content for YouTube.
Right. Yeah. So you have these people that depend on these content provider channels.
Well,
you have people that
they know no different. Not only do they depend on it, they expect it, and they think it's owed them. The services, the fast streaming, the lifestyle.
And these people on YouTube that are making money off of it, I mean, maybe they do need a different class of internet. I mean, if your job is to consume bandwidth and in turn cause other people to consume bandwidth, maybe you take some responsibility financially in that respect. So, I mean, that's one potential solution to problem the second, and in turn problem the first. But I have another option: is what comes next. So we already went through this. The internet was just this means to transmit text, images, and the occasional video, occasional WAV file. We solve WAV files by coming up with MP3s, better compression, lower amount of data going over the line. But then there were a lot of MP3s. So that didn't really solve the problem. It did create another one. People consuming this digital content requires bandwidth. Higher quality images, higher quality videos, higher quality music. All of this requires more bandwidth. And then we have Netflix. There's streaming. Hulu, streaming video. So as people who binge watch these seasons of TV shows in one day, that's a huge amount of bandwidth to do that sort of stuff. So, and the solution there is, okay, we could do the same thing for video that we did for audio, and we did that with, OGG or MKV, and so we're kind of, we're always working on it, but we're much better now than we ever used to be as far as compression for that. But the appetite and means to consume
continue to grow
is
at
growing
exponential
at
rates,
exponential rate. And then now you have this whole concept of virtual reality. So I can guarantee you the next big thing is streaming virtual reality. So let's say some intrepid producer decides that they're going to film a movie from every possible angle, and they're going to compile all of that into a massive VR stream. So basically you can wear a virtual reality helmet or goggles or whatever the fuck, and you could walk around the movie set as the movie's going on. How cool is that? Yeah. But how much fucking data does that require to run? A huge amount. So that ISPs are looking at that and they're saying, okay, this is coming. What are we going to do? So aside from giving everybody an OC12 to their house, and that's not going to happen, they have to come up with a way to either incentivize the providers to up their infrastructure, the ISPs, in some way, shape, or form, which is either the consumers pay more money, or the government grants them money, or something along those lines, some conglomerate of really benefit.
Or we buy a giant plot of land a few miles down the road. We make Chicago number 2 and just pave the old one and start over.
You know that nuking and paving is near and dear to my heart. and I truly believe it fixes a lot of things. But I imagine there'd be some upset people.
Yeah. There's a lot of trees between here and Livingston.
Yeah.
We could just make Conroe number 2 and start over.
Yeah.
And rebuild it.
Yeah. Just start from the ground up with really high quality fiber.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that might be a heavy-handed approach. But so we have this stuff coming down the line that's obviously going to be even more data than what we're used to seeing now. Not to mention the fact that we're already exponentially increasing the requirements on the infrastructure that we do have.
You're currently there.
Yeah.
And you're also they're still in the process. Granted, it's with newer infrastructure, but you're expanding your range to meet more customers, right?
Right.
So there's that going on too.
Yeah, it's true. And we also kind of like to think of the internet as an American thing. and it's not. The internet is global. And in the grand scheme of things, global corporations pay very little attention to what happens in the United States as far as the internet goes. I guarantee you Microsoft doesn't care. They have data centers in nearly every country. So, if they don't like how things are run here, who cares?
Yeah. The Pirate Bay Island just moves again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, there's also that part to think about. So, beyond the first issues presented plus, the ever-growing appetite, plus the ever-growing access of the rest of the world to consume content that may reside here in the United States and use that bandwidth as well. What do you do for those people? I mean, you can't charge, somebody in Zimbabwe a Netflix surcharge, at least not as an American company, but the companies that the Zimbabwe internet providers buy internet from sure could. And that's where we have these sorts of issues. So we look at the problems. We look at what can happen. What could happen? We've seen what can happen, with Netflix and Comcast. We've seen what can happen with Comcast and their customers. We've seen those sorts of things. And you're right when you say, a lot of people don't have a choice. So, the immediate response to that is, well, find a different internet provider. Well, if you live in an apartment complex,
yeah,
what recourse do you have? What
if you live in a neighborhood that contracted to just one cable provider?
Yeah, and it seems more common than it's not. I mean, you had where you moved, you only had one cable provider, although AT&T was also available. Mm-hmm. Right?
No. So where I currently live, I have either the option of DSL or cable.
Right.
Yeah. And they're both not great providers.
Right. And that's what I have where I live too. So where I used to live had fiber to the house.
Yeah.
And that was awesome.
I miss that.
I miss that so much. Yeah. I do. I lie awake at night. But no,
we're pouring one out for our old house.
Exactly.
Right
well, not on this carpet, but
I'm sure it's seen worse.
It's water.
Yeah, whatever. So anyway, but now I have my choice of either Comcast or I have copper through AT&T,
mm-hmm.
which Comcast is kind of copper too, but whatever.
I know what you mean.
A more different copper.
A more different copper.
Solid core versus twisted pair.
Right. So I have UVerse right now.
Yeah.
And my maximum speed that I can possibly get through them is 18 megabits a second. You know how fast I've never gotten on that router? 18 megabits a second. So, but that's the price I pay to not have Comcast. So I could have Comcast and have 200 megs a second if I wanted to pay for it. But, and eventually I will move to that when my contract is up with AT&T. But, so, I know what that's like to not have the options, so, so what's the answer? And that's what the FCC is asking. So what's the answer? And the unhelpful response is, don't take away my internet. The unhelpful response is, I really like net neutrality. The unhelpful response is, please don't repeal it. None of that helps what they want. None of that gives them answers. So, the FCC laid out something like 160 questions in the original notice for new rulemaking that they put out in 2014. And that every individual question says, we are looking for guidance on, we're looking for comments on, and what they got was the internet needs to be free. It needs to be open. Some people read it partially, and they said, the option that you presented for Title II, that sounds like a great option. But why? And in what way? Why is it better than, Section 706? Why is it, the preferable solution? And what do you think that means? The FCC didn't even know how to read that act themselves in that through that lens. The 5 commissioners of the FCC are not elected. They're not elected officials. So to them, putting forth legislation like rules seemed incorrect. And I mean, and I applaud them honestly for that because I mean we elect people for this purpose. We elect representatives, we elect senators, and it's their responsibility to make legislation. It's not the responsibility of the 5 commissioners of the FCC to determine how the internet is taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what was put on them, and the response is overwhelmingly, or the concurrence or the dissent. I mean, they all read a lot like, God, we have no clue what we're doing. We really wished that the process we had for this whole concept of comments and whatnot was better. And part of what came out of the original, referendum, I guess you could call it, was we need to do better at listening to what people have to say. We need to have a better way of them to give us these comments. And, believe it or not, their eDocs comment submission thing is the better solution than what they had before. And it crashed under the weight of its own fail. And that's unfortunate, but honestly, no one input could take that. They need to have a much more distributed manner of collecting this sort of information. And I think that they're recognizing that and realizing that. But I can guarantee you they still don't know the right answer.
Yeah.
And I don't think any one person in this room does either.
Oh no. This is a damn podcast to talk about like nerdy stuff, but occasionally we dip our toes into more important matters, some things that we're concerned about.
No, it's important that people know about this stuff. I mean, they need to be educated about it, and I like the opportunity to come on and talk to whatever audience. I mean, we've got, I mean, the more people who understand this concept, the more people that understand the underlying, infrastructure, the better, honestly. I mean, you're better off for it in a number of ways. I mean,
there is a lot of misconception about our place in the world, where a lot of things are concerned.
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing I was reading, as far as what we pay for broadband versus what we get out of it, is way off kilter compared to other nations.
God, yeah.
South Africa is considerably on the other side of the scale from what we pay for and what we get.
Oh God, yeah.
But we're a big ass chunk of land with a lot of old shit.
Yeah, that's true. We were the pioneers of telecommunication. I mean, unless you want to count the Italians, but I mean, and that was really just radio. But you're right. We get a lot for our return on investment for internet access is huge. I mean, anybody's is, honestly. I mean, a lot of it's intangible, truly. But I mean, having access to the wealth of knowledge out there for anything is invaluable. It truly is. And I mean, the other day they had this big story about somebody who wanted to sue Microsoft because their internet connection had to kick in to download Windows 10.
Yeah.
And it cost them like $9,000 just to do that. Just one computer. So I mean, you try to put that into perspective. Like you don't pay $9,000 a year for internet.
Oh yeah.
I mean, much less a damn week.
Yeah.
So like,
well, here's the actual. Well, according to this article, here's the actual statistic for it. In the U.S., we're roughly paying $3.50 per megabit. Russia, it's 98 cents per megabit. Ukraine, 90 cents per megabit. Our average download speed is considerably down the list. We're somewhere around 20 megabits. Almost every developed nation is far ahead of what we get. So for our investment, and you say, I mean, I don't disagree that someone has to pay for it to develop it, to build it, to increase our access to this. But I don't know what the crossover point is for how we regulate it, how we rule on it, and how we make sure that corporations who are they're around, they want to protect their investment. More importantly, they want to protect their profits, and they want to increase it, and they want to see that graph moving constantly up, upward. And I don't necessarily believe that their consumer base is really of a concern to them, because at this point, it's understood that they need it anyway.
Right. And I completely agree with you. I mean, there is a lot of potential there for abuse, and they're just. And
it's not. I'm not trying to make like a boogeyman argument here.
No,
it's just that this is kind of the reality, and we have seen some issues in the past, and we've had to have these situations where it's a very much Jesus take the wheel kind of situation now, because it seems to be a constant battle with the populace versus government,
versus corporations,
where they say, I don't want to have to deal with it, I just know this is bad, I'm electing you to take care of it.
Right. And
it seems to be a revolving door where that never gets answered.
Right. Well, because, I mean, the people have the voice, but the corporations have the money.
Yeah.
And that's where the problem lies. And so, I mean, people can yell and scream all they want, and they can.
But we're so far removed from being able to vote with your dollar.
That's right.
I mean, you need it. It's like water. You need it.
Right.
These are the only people you can go to get it.
Yep.
And unless you can afford to go somewhere else and take your money down the road and be able to get something else,
right,
then this is what you got.
Yeah. And that was, the problem with electric power, and telecommunication and telephone,
until it was deregulated.
Yeah. Until it was regulated. And then deregulated.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so either we take that page from history and we repeat it, or we find a novel solution for this. I mean, one of the things that all of those had in common is there was one input in your house for that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if you wanted power, one cable came into your house, and it was laid there by one company. You wanted phone, likely one cable came into your house, and it was put there by one company. You want internet, all bets are off. I mean, you can get cable, you can get copper, you can get fiber, you can get complete wireless, some areas.
Satellite.
Yeah, and satellite. So, I mean, it's a multimodal form of information delivery.
Is the medium a problem there?
So I believe that that is one of the big barriers to it being,
because is it the scatter and not knowing what specific one you invest in if you're going to improve something?
So I think that's part of it. I think that a lot of them are complementary. I mean, satellite handles the responsibility of the last mile. People who live out in the rural areas.
Yeah.
And telephone handles the old guard, and by extension, fiber, and then cable. I mean, it generally runs alongside. So, I mean, I think one of the barriers to internet being considered a utility is that there's not one connection into a house for internet. There's not an internet pipe.
Yeah. Well, you've also seen, I mean, and I'm not advocating for them, but you've seen companies try to make ends meet and try to make headway into the problem with bandwidth, like AT&T, for instance. Mm-hmm. They bought out DirecTV, right? So now they provide their AT&T, instead of what used to be UVerse, to provide internet and TV, the amount of satellite, and they pump your live streaming video, your HD channels and everything else through satellite. Mm-hmm. And then they have the internet connection as backup, and you can go back and stream a few days back through your fiber or your cable or your copper connection. And so they're trying to minimize some of that real-time bandwidth and that overload from HD programming, put that through satellite, which doesn't require any infrastructure change at all. It requires a satellite dish and a piece of equipment in your house, So I think these companies could make headway with some infrastructure changes, either better infrastructure or just changes in their business model.
Well, what other option is there? Because it's not like you can get a startup overnight that's going to be able to just come along and start laying down fiber.
Yep.
I mean,
Google, for instance.
Google.
Yes, say that, and I was about to bring.
And there's actually another company that's laying a lot of fiber as well. I can't remember the name of it, but I've seen their trucks around. They're laying fiber infrastructure to
Verizon does too.
compete. Yeah, Verizon does as well. So to compete in that industry. So you have other people trying to emerge in the market. You have companies that are trying to get creative with the multimodal solutions. And packaging those together into one bill for many services. They're really trying to take advantage of it. So there really is no perfect answer.
It's a difficult market because, ultimately it's going to come down to you saying that the free market will decide. But it is a limited market, and you don't have enough competition to honestly throw caution to the wind and say that that's going to be the ultimate deciding factor about where this goes.
Oh, no, I agree. There should be. Yeah. I think there should be some sort of regulation on it. But how do we do that? Where do we go? I think the FCC is saying we really don't want this. We're not equipped to handle this, which is kind of what they pushed back on before. Now it's been thrown on their plate. Now it's going to be, okay, the government's saying, well, let's repeal this. We don't want the FCC handling this.
Right.
Maybe they're going to develop, like you said, go to a utility-based system. Maybe they're going to develop a whole new branch, which wouldn't surprise me. It would probably not work out well, but, they would develop a whole new division of the government that manages internet communications, regardless of the medium.
Or maybe maybe it's down to taking a bit of a trust fall and letting this get rolled back and honestly take a look at how these companies are going to do business in a more deregulated environment. Because I think there's enough examples in the past, despite continuing efforts to create these walled gardens, these tiered systems, that we don't want it. But unfortunately, we do have a dangerous precedent set by Netflix paying Comcast a ton of money to get their bandwidth turned back up again. So that precedent's already there. That
I don't know what ended up happening with that. When the FCC said that paid prioritization was a bad thing, did that go away? So I never heard much follow up on that. Did Netflix get to terminate the peering agreement and then just say, look, let bygones be bygones and we'll be done now?
As far as I've read about the situation, they went ahead and paid. Basically,
I know they did.
Yeah.
I know they paid, but I'm saying, like, did the agreement persist after
that? I don't know. I don't know if the agreement was still on.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah. So go ahead and look that one up real quick.
I'm going to.
Yeah. Yes. I forgot where I was where I left off here.
The trust fall.
Yeah, the trust fall. So if these regulations do get rolled back, what tools are there for the consumer who doesn't have the benefit of choice? What tools are available to them other than complaining to the FCC that they need to step in and keep Comcast or AT&T or whoever you want from dialing back the bandwidth on services that they not just depend on, but the convenience matters and the entertainment matters that they've invested in. As far as making a decision with their entertainment dollar, with their work, their business concerns, people who work from home, that a lot of their lives are tied up in the internet and how they interact with it. What recourse do they have if the big bad corporate monster of your internet provider decides that they're not too concerned with the way you feel about it?
Well, one option they have now is truly to use their phones. The vast majority a larger portion of lower income individuals and minorities use their phones as their only means of internet access.
Yeah.
And with the right type of plan and the right type of device, I mean, you can truly use it as your connection to the internet for other devices too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can use your device as a hotspot, and or you can even get a purpose-built hotspot from a cellular provider for that thing. I mean, these things are becoming more and more legitimate, replacements for a true internet connection. So I mean that is an option. Whether or not it's a better one, is, I guess your mileage may vary. I mean, it really depends on where you live and what kind of activities you do. I mean, cellular internet doesn't have the best latency.
Yeah.
It may have some pretty good throughput, depending on the time of day and congestion and all sorts of stuff. But they're also generally limited in the amount of data you can get on a monthly basis. Whereas even if it is limited for your wireline-based stuff, it's maybe 10 to 20 to 50 times the limit. Yeah, so most people don't reach it. But I mean, that's an option. And I think other things like that will eventually come out. I mean, at this moment, I mean, that's really all they got. You stick with what's there, and you agree to the rules that they present, or you move, which may not be an option. Which, I mean, to have to move because the internet sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty bad trade-off,
Right.
But I mean, on
Honestly,
paper, it's an option. I mean,
honestly, when I moved here, that was the number one thing on my mind was, thank God I get away from InTouch.
right? But you were moving anyway. So
I was moving anyway.
You needed to find another place to be.
But that was such a gigantic relief that I wasn't held prisoner by this horrible internet provider anymore that I had countless issues with.
No, you don't get to complain until you've had ignition with a Y.
Yeah. So the way things stand now, I think the biggest benefit is for a lot of factors for what's kicked off towards the end of 2016 and the beginning of 2017 is it seems a lot more people are familiar with who their representative is. They're a lot more willing, whether or not in a reasonable fashion or an unreasonable fashion, they seem to be more willing to engage and see exactly what government is doing. The next steps with the way this goes, it seems like there's going to be a repeal of this no matter what.
Yeah. I mean, they've got the numbers for it. And, I mean, to the GOP, this is anti-business.
Yeah.
And in some respects, I mean, you can make that argument. I mean, it says that these companies can't come up with, relatively cost-effective ways of increasing their revenue. I mean, just to play the devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's right or wrong or whatever. So this limits their options. Now, if the argument is, okay, if we take these regulations away and we allow you to do these things, does that mean that you're going to, put money into your infrastructure and improve it? And if that was the ultimate result of this, then I think that it might not be that terrible of a thing. There are definitely avenues for them to make money here. Like we talked about the content provider, content producers, for YouTube, for example. I mean, if you upload stuff to YouTube on a regular basis as a profession, whatever, maybe you do need to pay a little more for internet, and if that sort of prioritization or that sort of surcharge or whatever becomes, their solution, then I don't think many people would argue with it, honestly.
Yeah. I mean,
And the
corporations are used to paying a significant amount. And we were talking about this the other day with your company versus a home internet. The timeline, the business line, the dedication, and the routing, and the work that goes into that. I mean, you're looking at 3 months to get internet for a corporation, a business, and that kind of stuff set up. But it's different. You have better bandwidth prioritization. You have SLAs for downtime support and availability. You have support. Like, you have that kind of stuff. You have guaranteed response times with technicians and repairs and things like that. So, if someone is going to be running a business from home and they're using a $60 a month internet connection, they really don't have a right to bitch if it's not working for a couple hours or it goes down.
But wouldn't the counter to that to be? I mean, the counter to that argument that if you're making money off of this thing, you should pay more. It seems quite tied into phone, and there have been countless people over the past however many number of years we've had telephone that have made money off of their telephone.
That's true.
But
generally they pay more for it. So, I mean, let's say, I'm sure there are some people out there who make money off of their one home phone line.
Yeah.
But, I mean, in order to be effective at telemarketing or whatever, generally you need more than one line, or you need a better quality plan, or an 800 number, or, back in the day, a 900 number. All those things cost money.
Well, not so much in the bulk. The bulk method of this, people who
are making a lot of money are using some bulk method of doing so.
I guess maybe give us an example of what you mean, somebody making money off their home phone.
Well, say
cell phone.
It's more internet based, but let's just use it for the sake of argument, like Advocare or Mary Kay or any of these do-it-yourself home business kind of things.
But a lot of those are leveraging a name that they also buy into, who also most likely buys much more expensive internet.
Okay, well, I mean, that's true, but we're trying. I'm trying to find some sort of way to equate something like a YouTuber, or for the sake of argument, this show, which doesn't make any money,
right?
Despite all my videos having the little monetization button clicked over. I don't make any money off of this.
Right.
I pay hosting fees for the audio. I pay a connection to the internet. Yes, YouTube is free, but it's supplemented by banner ads that I have no choice in providing.
Right.
The same thing with web pages I browse. I get hit with advertisements that I didn't ask for. I didn't pay for.
And that's to help those providers offset the cost of providing that site to you.
Sure. So I'm trying to find some sort of way to balance that. That yes, let's just say for grins, would it really be dependent on how much money I make off of using an upload or uploading something to YouTube? Where does that line get drawn? Is it just a blanket? You make money off of using this thing.
But I don't even know if there's a way the ISP can prove that. If
you're
not hosting a server for connections at your house and constant traffic from different places, right? I mean,
would the extension be is that, yes, I occasionally work from home, or even if I did strictly work from home 100% of the time, I'm using my internet connection to support my livelihood and make money off of.
Right. So, I mean, one way they could do it, potentially, is to basically say, okay, look, you want home internet? That's fine. Your uploads throttled to shit.
Which that already is the case. I mean, with my Comcast connection,
most uploads are a tenth of your download
right,
speed,
exactly.
or a 20th
exactly.
So,
I've got like 200 down. My upload is maybe 8.
Right. Yeah. And on mine, I have potentially 18 down, and I have less than 1 up. So I mean, but then let's say, okay, incentivize it a little bit, and offer a better package in business class internet for these people that has a higher upload, which that's what business class internet is. It's mostly symmetrical.
And that we see, I mean, not to equate YouTubers. YouTubers is basically make a video and you can have it upload all night if you want to.
Right.
This is more for, say, those who are career streamers.
Yeah.
Right.
Their game streamings and esports is a huge thing now. I mean, actually, I know at least 2 people who have quit their job and they are full-time streamers. They end up making more money playing freaking Counter-Strike all day.
Right.
So there is that side of it, and they are paying for better internet that supports the upload for what they're doing.
Right.
So that's already there.
Mm-hmm.
That's already there. I think more of what I may have misunderstood your side of the argument is that they somehow, say a streamer or a YouTuber like Jenna Marbles or something like that, who makes $50 million a year from just being an internet celebrity,
right,
would somehow have to pay more for the luxury of being an internet celebrity.
Right. So I guess that wasn't really what I wanted to get across.
It seems like a weird way. It seems like an odd. If I'm to think about business as a whole, it seems like an odd way to penalize or tax someone for just being successful in a medium that we haven't found a way to punish someone for being successful in.
Sure, and the government, the United States government, is very good at punishing success.
Yeah.
So they're good at a few things, but. And that's another avenue, honestly. So I mean, let's say the government says, okay, we'll keep our hands out of regulating the internet, but we are going to reclassify anybody who makes money through the internet through the IRS, which I hate. And if you report that your business is internet based, then you have a special type of tax that's paid. And that special type of tax goes into a fund that is then delineated through grants to ISPs to increase their investment in infrastructure. If I could prove that the taxes that I paid went to something useful,
you'd be a little
I'd be a little
happier.
less reticent.
Sure.
To pay 'em. So I mean, so that's one avenue that they could take with this. They could use something that a concept that already exists, and create a channel for that revenue, and distribute it as necessary. So it would appease the Democrats because it's wealth redistribution, and it would appease the Republicans because the government is not being anti-business for big business.
Yeah, because I mean, my counter to that would be is that the past however many decades has seen the demise of the mom and pop store that can't afford brick and mortar anymore, and those have in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, it's not like old school, old person mom and pop shops, but a lot of those things that would have taken up strip center space have moved to strictly online.
Right.
So it seems to me that would possibly keep people from competing in that realm, and you don't really have too many people that would venture into that if they have to pay a tax on it.
Potentially, I mean, but honestly, you pay tax anyway. I mean, when you have a business, you pay a ridiculous amount of taxes in the United States.
For sure.
So I mean, what I'm saying is, don't create something new. I'm saying redirect. Like
change the percentages.
Yeah, exactly. Just take a portion of what people already pay for taxes if they're this type of business or whatever, and redirect it to an infrastructure fund. So I mean, that's something that
you could
gives
even
the infrastructure.
You could even call it something warm and fuzzy, like improve the homeland, blah blah blah.
Exactly. Like connect the farmland or something. I mean, because ultimately the goal is to get everybody, even in rural America, connected, and that's one of the things that makes the United States unique. Is we have a large population who still lives outside of urban areas. Yeah. And in a lot of other countries, developing ones, whatever. I mean, either they're entirely rural, or they're almost entirely urban. Mm-hmm. So we have this fun mix, and we have more cars, and we drive further for work, and we live further from things, and we like our space because we have space, and so that's what makes the infrastructure in the United States so difficult to maintain. Whereas, sure, you can say Afghanistan has faster internet than the United States, but it only has, it's not like every home in Afghanistan has internet access.
Yeah, for sure.
But every person in Afghanistan has access to the internet because they have, like internet cafes and things like that. And the internet that's there is fast.
Definitely, yeah, definitely the way it's used across the world. I mean, Japan and their city centers and their culture as a whole operate extremely differently than we do. And I think those things definitely do have to be taken into consideration when we talk about like internet usage, access to speed, how much they pay, and all those factors.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't want to intentionally slow our improvements and in other words that I'm too tired to think of right now. I wouldn't want to delay our infrastructure improvements because we somehow saddle the rate of our development with another country that does behave differently.
Right.
I don't want to see us intentionally kneecap ourselves because it's like, well, we got it better than most, and it's at your house, and we're just different, and we
no, and
if you want it better, go to an internet cafe. That kind of a thing.
Right, and I guess I didn't want to make.
And I'm not putting words in your mouth. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just
so
arguments and counter arguments.
No, understood, understood, and I just wanted to make sure that
yeah.
But
bro hug, yeah. Bro fists. Yeah. Yep.
Anyway,
that sound was to me. That sound was bro fist.
Bro fist. Yes.
That weird grunt in the microphone.
So the goal here is that any regulations that do get created shouldn't stymie innovation.
Yeah,
and that's the argument.
And that's always the argument. Anytime that there's anytime that you're going to regulate anything or pass a law on something, the argument is always that this is going to hurt business development. This is going to hurt. Again, freaking words.
Progress.
Wow. Yes, progress. The development of new technologies and things.
Yeah, lower people's ability and desire to invest, and whether that's actually true or not is immaterial. Because if the end result is, if because of this, Comcast doesn't make an investment, then that argument is true, whether or not it is legitimate.
Yeah.
So if the law truly prevents the innovation or not is immaterial, and that's what people kind of need to get through their heads. So a lot of corporations just react immediately to any sort of threat of regulation, and that reaction is generally just to clam up and stuff their money in a mattress. So it's not in our best interest to make that happen. Now, are they acting like children? Yeah. Are they being shitty? Yeah. Do they still control that infrastructure? You bet. So until the United States government gets into the business of laying fiber, they don't really have any recourse there. So then it goes back to the argument before. Is it a utility? Should it be a utility? And if it is, how do they govern it as one? Do they govern it just like electricity? Because that's had its share of controversy in the past too. Yeah.
There's other states that are just now getting deregulated.
Right.
So we're still learning from our mistakes there.
And like I said, the internet is unique in this. In that there are multiple modes of connecting to it. You can't connect, to different types of electricity. At least not yet.
Yeah.
One electricity is all there is. One gas is all there is.
We're still trying to figure out alternative methods of creating energy.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's still alternating current, 60 hertz electric power. So, the end product there is the same. Internet is not the same. It's radio waves. It's electric signals. It's light. Lasers. Whatever. So it's hard to say we want to treat this as a utility when there's so many ways to connect to, and so many pieces of redundant infrastructure.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, they're redundant.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, whether one's better than another, again, is immaterial. They both connect you to the internet. And that's what we're talking about. You know. So.
It's a freaking difficult subject.
Yeah.
The only real hope for this was to hopefully educate whoever listens to this show on the minute details that you have to get into when you start considering something like this, and how the internet works, and how things, how this utility that you use, or utility. We already say it like that. Yeah.
Careful with that term.
Yeah, how this tool that you use in your life may actually function, and how do you get around the idea of trying to come up with laws and regulations to figure out how the whole thing works, and to find out what's in the best interest of the consumer, while also finding out how you appease the companies that are investing the money into it. Right. So hopefully this helped out. I think we've gone like an hour and a half on this. I think it's a good cutting point to go in this conversation. We may do it again. You certainly opened up my eyes to a lot of things I hadn't thought about, and that's exactly why I wanted to have you in on this conversation. So again, with anybody that listens to this, Facebooks, Twitters, if you have any comments, concerns, if you have any feedback, if you think Chris is a quack,
let me know.
Yeah. He'll fight you. Thanks both of guys for doing the show. We hope we may do this again. Episode 100 is the very next one. I'm very excited about that, and excited to see where this whole thing goes. This is a whole new medium. We talked about the possibilities of a whole new generation of people making money just doing this.
Yeah.
I enjoy the hell out of it. If you would like to pay me to do this, I would gladly take your money. But I guess until next time, thanks for listening. This is a good show. Freaking like doing this, man.
Yeah, man.
You should do this more.
I should.
I'll invite you. Good night, everybody.